Welcome to the Bootleg Zones. The real Ghostbusters Dodge in the Dark driving game was put out by Parker Brothers in 1988. It's kind of interesting that Real Ghostbusters had a game put out by Parker, as it was rival Milton Bradley who are the ones who put out the Real Ghostbusters board game. Though in '84 Hasbro bought Milton Bradley, and by '91 they also owned Parker Brothers. So, eventually both of these games were put out by the same company, sort of. And if you look it up, you'll find that Hasbro actually still hosts a PDF of the instructions for this game, which is kinda neat. The artwork on the box is pretty neat, and a little different than the stuff you'd see on the Kenner products out around the time. Now also owned by Hasbro. And even though this artwork is a slightly different style, some of the ghosts on here are actually from commonly used photos for Real Ghostbusters. Like, you can find this particular pose of Stay Puft used on different things. And the same goes for some of these other ghosts on here. These other ghosts were also used for some of the Kenner toys, but it looks like they at least redrew them for the box here. The cover even warns us, "Caution! This box contains ghosts!" I do love that they put that on there. That's awesome. And as this is a projection game, it requires batteries, which weren't included. There's a shock, but it's double D's. So here's what comes with the Dodge in the Dark driving game. You got your projector, the discs you stick the ghosts on, and the warned about ghosts. The ghosts to add to the game originally all came on a plastic sheet where you'd punch them out to add them to the game. We've got two different versions of Slimer here, and funny enough, they seem to be his two incarnations, this one being kind of the movie bad guy Slimer, and this being the Real Ghostbusters goofy sidekick Slimer. The same is also kind of true for the two Stay Puffs. This one could be more of the movie version, and then this one looks more like the happy good guy Stay Puft, which he was sometimes in the cartoon. And the other ones are kind of more generic ghosts, but they do seem to be based on Kenner Real Ghostbusters ghosts again. And even though they have different versions of Slimer and Stay Puft, one where they look kind of nice, it doesn't matter because if you put them on the disc, they're in your way, so they're bad guys. So here's a closer look at the projector and how the controls kind of work in this game. This dial here is your steering wheel and how you move around Ecto-1 around the disc board, whatever you want to call it. Here you got the speeds for Ecto-1, neutral, low, and high. The game goes for a specific amount of time, and the point while you're playing is just to avoid things and see how long you can go without crashing into things. The longer you go without crashing, the more points you'll get, which maxes out at 100. This indicator here goes up the longer you're playing without crashing, and with this dial here, you can mark on your highest score and then try to beat it. Alright, so at the top of this video, I gave a 1988 release date for this game because that's the latest date on the instructions, but the toy itself is marked 1987. Now, to start our game of dodging in the dark, you're going to first want to put the handle on the control device here. And once you got the handle on there, this turns into a kind of ghost zapping device of sorts. So I'm sure any kid that had one of these had fun playing with it as one of those as well. This disc here that you set into the projector becomes your playing board, and it spins around as you try to avoid things like houses and other obstacles with Ecto-1. It's kind of neat looking at the details they put onto this, like there's even a little graveyard with a couple coffins in it. These slots here are for adding the ghosts to your game, and you can add as few or as many as you want to make it an easier or harder drive. Or I suppose you could add absolutely none and it'd be a really boring night for the Ghostbusters. So I'm gonna add in 4 here and we'll see how well this goes. Got a Slimer and a Stay Puft and 2 of the other ghosts. The disc just gets slotted into the front of the projector here and is held in with a magnet. And now we're ready to drive in the dark. Well, I guess I'd better actually turn some lights on. Now, before we start up a game here, let's look at the backstory, I guess, that they've got on the box. The ghost projector that turns any blank wall into an action-packed racetrack. Turn out the lights, switch on your ghost projector, and fasten your seatbelt. You're in the driver's seat of Ecto-1, barreling down a highway. But watch out, because this road's filled with haunted buildings, brick walls, and other obstacles like creepy Ghostbusters ghosts. I'm glad they're Ghostbusters ghosts. It'd be awkward if they're ghosts from another series. That lurk and roam while you drive and dodge them. You pick the ghost you want and insert as many as you want onto the special ghost disc. Insert the disc, slip into lower high gear, and you're off on a thrills and chills ghost-bustin' ride. So join the real Ghostbusters team with the Dodge in the Dark driving game. Once projected onto a wall, the disc forms the road with Ecto-1 driving around at the bottom of your screen. Anytime you come into contact with an object, it stalls Ecto-1 for a while, costing you time, which also means your score will be lower. So putting more ghosts on the track obviously makes it that much harder, though the ghosts do kind of stand out the best as they have color compared to the walls and buildings. It is a pretty decent challenge trying to get a good run and not crash into things, and then trying to beat your own score. It's also pretty nice that this projection game has a couple of ways to play with the challenge, like the amount of ghosts on the track and changing what speed you're driving at. I gotta say though, the Ghostbusters are a pretty big menace to the city in this game, as all they do is drive Ecto around erratically, crashing into stuff while never busting any ghosts. Playing in high gear seems to make your score rise a lot quicker, as even though I ran into a few things there, I scored a 95 on my last playthrough, and it seems like you need almost a perfect go at it in low gear to get around that score. I'm sure part of the reason I enjoy this that much is just the novelty of it, and if it didn't have the real Ghostbusters name on it, I likely wouldn't care as much. But as it is, it does offer a pretty neat and different portable gameplay experience. Probably not the most convenient game, but it was at least one you could play in the dark. Because you had to. Alright, crazy fan theory time, guys! This game came out around the same time Ghostbusters 2 was being made, and in a deleted scene, Ray gets possessed by Vigo and drives Ecto-1 crazily around town. That's what this whole game is based on! A deleted scene! That's also why you don't bust any ghosts in this game! And you might be thinking, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to base a whole game on a deleted scene, especially whereas this is a real Ghostbusters game, but this scene did actually happen in the real Ghostbusters comic adaptation of the second movie. This also explains Winston's absence from the box, as he was the one who had to put an end to Ray's bad driving by punching him in the face. Or it's just a driving game, whatever. Hey, who are you gonna call? Well, with this phone, I suppose it had better be Ghostbusters. I am so glad this is a thing that exists. I love it. We're getting extra real with this product, as it's the real Ghostbusters real telephone. They probably did have to specify that, though, as I'm sure a lot of people might just think this is a toy at first. Pretty cool feature about this phone, too, is that it's new! Sweet, I've gone back 30 years to 87! See all you 2017 suckers later! We got a 1-year warranty on this, but I don't see how that ever matters when this is always gonna be new. Really real telephone, though. I've never understood putting new on the actual packaging like this, because it's gonna be a liar pretty darn soon. We got some pretty sweet features with this phone, like pulse/tone switch. I'm sure that's good. And redial memory. Remember when that was a luxury? And here would be my favorite feature, switching the ringer off so I don't actually get your calls. Privacy mute button, and a 6-foot cord. You can also hang this phone up on your sweet wood panel wall. It can also be used in purgatory, apparently, which counts as your desk phone, which I guess is pretty apt. A real telephone. I don't know why that amuses me, but them adding an "ah" to it on the side of the box seems funnier somehow. The back of the box gives us that same desk phone purgatory view where it lets us know how to use such a complicated device as a telephone. Wait, the hashtag button is for redial? Hashtag how do I access Twitter on this phone? The Real Ghostbusters Real Telephone, or A Real Telephone, was made by Remco. You may remember them from such other Real Ghostbusters treats as the electronic arcade game.
Just open it already, shut up.
So inside we've got our no-ghost base for the phone and the receiver, protected by some cardboard, and the instructions. So the instructions tell us how to display the phone 3 different ways, just flat or slightly raised up or wall-mounted. The no-ghost looks particularly terrified about this prospect. The flip side of the instructions tell us once again how to use a phone, you know, that function on your phone that you probably use the least. Once again, you can switch the phone to pulse dialing if you live in an area where pulse dialing service is used. You know, I'd think this phone was old if the box didn't tell me how new it was. Receiving a call. Whenever the phone rings, pick it up and use it as a standard telephone. I don't know. If you need the instructions to tell you that, you can't handle this. Though I suppose some people these days might actually be unfamiliar with old school placing the phone down to hang it up. This phone can remember the last number you dialed. Think of all the time that'll save you. Your PC phone? This phone's a computer? Yeah, right, that'll be the day. So back in these dark ages of corded phones, you actually had to plug them into the wall. You know, pretty frightening. And if you have a 4-prong receptacle, you'll need an adapter to plug this phone in. I don't even know what the hell a 4-prong thingy is. And if you're outside the US and Canada and you're hardcore about using this phone, you can just wire the damn thing up yourself. Wow, I'm glad at least they gave them instructions for that. So here's our pieces of the phone. We got the no-ghost base, which is just a giant piece of plastic with this, since all the electronics are housed within the receiver. On the back, we got some rubber stoppers so it won't scrape up the wall if you got it wall mounted. And we got the pretty stiff little flip switch here for if you just want it slightly slanted while you lay it down. And on the back, we again have the copyright dates for Columbia Pictures and when this toy was made by Remco. And it was made in China. One of the things I particularly like about this phone, I mean, besides obviously that it's Ghostbusters, is how they made the No Ghost logo kind of 3D so he pops out. There was another really similar No Ghost style Ghostbusters phone where it was just flat. So yeah, in my opinion, the Remco Real Ghostbusters phone is the much cooler looking design of the two. We got this piece which goes in here, and that's mostly just so if you have the phone wall mounted, it won't just fall right off to the floor. So yeah, once upon a time, these connectors were actually used for telephones and not just your internet and modems and whatnot. And your telephone calls were bound by a cord. Can't say I miss that. I do wish I had a working landline so I could call the phone and we could hear it, but it's an 87 phone. There's no way it's a special ringtone or anything, so here's what it might have sounded like. But that's kind of boring, so we can always hope that it sounded a little more like this. Hello? If I was gonna nitpick something about it, I guess it'd be that I wish that the ghost kind of looked whole until you put the receiver on it, but still, I absolutely adore the design of having the phone receiver be, the slash and the no ghost logo. Hashtag who you gonna call? That's what I'm typing. Pretend. Shut up. There, guys, I'm finally reviewing another Pulse. Wow. Hang up. Ringer off. I love this phone, even though it's pretty much useless, because who am I gonna call? No one on this! Yeah! Inconvenient. Hello? Who you gonna call? No, Q5, I don't accept your apology. You ruined my favorite show back in the day. How'd you even get this number? This phone isn't even hooked up! Angry hanging up was so much more satisfying back in the day. Back in the 80s, 90s, and even a bit in the early 2000s, there were odd contraptions made to give you the ability to watch portable movies, and we're looking at one where, of course, they put real Ghostbusters out for it. These are the mini-movies. These mini-movies seem to be fairly obscure, as they were mostly just released in the UK. What I have here are the 3 mini-movies released for real Ghostbusters, which were Ecto Escape, Slimer Chase, and Save the Day. And I think you could only get Save the Day package with the viewer, but that was okay for me, because I kinda needed a viewer, else I wouldn't be able to do that much with these, would I? That probably was a little annoying back in the day, though, if you're buying different titles under the mini-movies line and you had to keep buying a viewer just because you couldn't get a particular film without it. But yeah, other titles that I know of that were released for this mini-movies thing were Duckula, The Pink Panther, Popeye, Tom and Jerry, and Betty Boop. Oh, and yeah, there was also Chippendales. I don't know for sure if this was released by the same company, but it looks like the exact same thing. They might just call themselves something different to try and separate it a bit with their adult peep show things with the cartoon stuff. Mini-movie's slogan was, "In the palm of your hand," which just kind of emphasizes what a novelty that would have been back then. And it looks like these were released in '86 based on the latest date we have on here. The mini-movies were put out by a company called Tiny Hands.
A party at Donald Trump's place.
It wasn't that funny.
The parent company for these things is apparently Debset Limited. I didn't find too much else on them, except a page that talked about their trademark for mini-movies and their apparent liquidation. The mini-movie viewer only requires 1 AA, which is pretty rare, as almost everything required 2. The back of the card shows us a blue mini-movie viewer, which is of course not what we got in this package, but there were different colored ones that came with different movies, like these ones that came with soccer or football because it's the UK. The real Ghostbusters artwork on these cards is from some commonly reused stuff used for a lot of real Ghostbusters products. In fact, this rolled-up sleeve Peter is from a modified version of one of the earliest Real Ghostbusters promo pictures where they're all still wearing the tan suits and Peter still had a pre-final design. In fact, this exact same artwork was used for the player pieces on the UK version of the Real Ghostbusters board game. There are some oddities about the coloring of some of the artwork on these cards though, like here where Peter's hair looks almost green and he looks overly tanned a bit. But his hair only looks that way on the viewer version of the card. On the smaller, just movie card, they seem to have gotten his hair a more proper brown, but they kind of melted Janine's legs together in the smaller version of this picture. The two cards use different versions of Stay Puft, both which have been reused for things, though. The Happy Stay Puft is still being used for things quite recently, even. So these mini-movies are just kind of like a little miniature film reel, which is kind of interesting. The mini-movies also came with a free sticker inside, which was the exact same picture that was on the card. I have seen one variant of these, which was for the Slimer Chase movie, which is where the free sticker inside part had the No Ghost logo on it, but I don't think there's any difference about the contents. So apparently we have to hold the viewer towards a light source and then press the action button and the continuous loop of film just rolls and rolls. Battery not included, which is very good because it would have corroded by now. It's the exact same sticker with both of the films, so that's a little lame. And there's no sticker with the one that came with the viewer because, I mean, they couldn't afford to give you a sticker and the viewer. So here's the viewer, which is apparently also a keychain. I don't know how practical that ever would have been. We got our kind of slide buttons here. This one's supposed to be for the focus. This is frame control, and this is supposed to be the on and off switch. We just kind of slide this open here to put in our single AA, and since they showed a knockoff Duracell on the back, I suppose that's what I should use, right? So I guess to start off, we'll look at the one that came with the viewer, Ghostbusters Save the Day. And if we look really close in on the film, we can kind of see the Ghostbusters on there. So we just stick the film, or the video cartridge as the card calls it, into the back of it like this. I guess it just kind of sticks in like that. Then we just have the viewer eyepiece here, which I'll try to zoom in best I can to show you what this thing looks like. Welcome to the theater of the eye. Okay, so I'm just kind of figuring out how this thing works as I go here, of course, and this isn't really an on-off switch so much as it is you just hold the button and then it plays through the film loop. Here's my kind of ridiculous setup to try and get this to work with the camera. So I have a flashlight shining in behind the viewer here. Look, his face. I'm so close to getting something. This might be the best I can get. But as you can see, this is the original Real Ghostbusters pitch pilot, where they still have all the tan jumpsuits and Peter's got his still more Bill Murray-ish design. And Slimer's still a bad guy. But just has a couple parts on here. One where they're running through the hotel, and then the very ending where they're kind of emulating what would become the regular intro for the show. I never would have expected the pitch pilot to be on one of these, though. That's extremely odd, and this was kind of rare to come by until it was put on the Time Life DVD release. I'm doing the best I can to get you as much of this picture as I can with these, but it's not super easy with how small the viewer is on this, because, you know, you can see the Proto-Peter here, but Egon, you can kind of see a bit of his hair over there. He's supposed to be in the picture a bit, but it's really hard to get this any closer to show more of the picture. This is as close in as I can get with the lens I got, but at least this does give you guys a look at what this thing is kind of like. Since the film isn't really going through anything, it's just being played through the front of the viewer here. The tapes should just easily kind of pop in and out. Yeah, alright. I do like how it has that kind of like old-time silent film projector thing, especially with the noise this thing makes. But, I mean, you can see it's just a motor kind of spinning the film around once it goes in here through the viewer. So it's kind of interesting how they engineered this thing. Alright, so for our next what I can show you of it film, let's look at Slimer Chase. So our second movie is actually part of the same movie, with Slimer Chase again being part of the pitch pilot to sell the series. This is actually pretty amusing as well, as it features, you know, the evil Slimer from the movie rather than the good guy Slimer that we would see in the actual cartoon series. So this is the Ghostbusters chasing him with the intent to bust him. Slimer's also eating some Stay Puft marshmallows in this scene, so that's a nice nod as well. And for the last film of our triple feature, let's look at Ecto Escapade. Will Ecto Escapade be more of the pitch pilot? Seems most likely at this point. See Ecto jumping around and, yeah, scared woman crashing through the building, and this is Ecto driving through the hotel. You see a lot of film grain on this one in particular. Maybe it's just because I have it focused in a certain way. Also, the picture on this one seems jumpiest out of the three. Yeah, I can just kind of move this around each frame to show a little bit more of it. I wish I could have zoomed in a little nicer. We'll see Ecto crash in slow motion. This woman can't believe it. Oh!
Here they come. Got what you wanted, lady?
Oh no, not the Ghostbusters!
So I figure I probably should show you guys what it kind of looks like when you're using this thing properly instead of trying to jam a macro lens down it. But yeah, looks pretty cool, right? Trying to watch your weird Ghostbusters silent film on here. And you know, for quite a while, this would have been the only way for you to watch the pitch pilot. So that's kind of a weird thought. And it's just very weird that that's what was on these. I kind of wish there had been something else rather than all three of them being the pitch pilot, but it's still a very interesting find. Bad guy Slimer, gotta bust him.
He's gonna take over our series. Let's get him.
Yeah, no! They know I'm evil the whole time! Yeah!
Watching, and we'll see you in the morning. M-A-G-A.